right, well, welcome to our webinar with the ASCM/APIX Inland Empire chapter. We are excited to be here today with to talk about the ports. Certainly is a very hot topic. So this is in our emerging with supply chain strength webinar series that we kicked off and sponsored by LMA Consulting. And I am Lisa Anderson, president of ASCM Inland Empire and also president of LMA Consulting Group. And I'm very excited and thankful to John. Dear John, I should have asked you. Descasare? Is that the right way to say it?
That's close enough.
Close enough. All right. Well, thank you. With John, who is an expert on the ports, and I'm going to introduce John and turn it over to him. John said, feel free to ask questions. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat box and the Q&A. So please go ahead and put your questions there, and I'll feed them to John as I can fit them in. I know it's a very timely topic. So John is a CMC, and he's president of WCL Consulting Incorporated. After spending more than 15 years in the senior executive management positions with major transcontinental trucking operation, an importer and third-party logistics providers, John wanted to use his in-depth supply chain knowledge and experience to solve goods movement issues and challenges in the various global supply chain stakeholder industries. He works with clients to improve their business results by solving complex supply chain problems and optimizing goods movement networks. And wow, that is definitely something needed in the Southern California area. John is a specialist in supply chain interface issues, including ports of entry, third-party logistics partnerships, and warehouse location optimization. So we are very excited to have John with us today to give us a status on the ports. So with that said, John, I'll turn it over to you so that you can kick it off.
Well, thank you for attending the Zoom meeting. I promise you I'll share a lot of nuggets to try to make the complexity and the changing dynamics of these issues a little clearer in your mind. I call it a conversation. And that's what I like it to be, for you to ask questions as we go through via the chat box. And I've used where it says John DeCesare, it doesn't say president of WCO, because it says interpreter. And that's what I do in my business. I've done for many years helping people understand what dynamics in the supply chain are impacting their business models and what they should change. What we're looking at here is a picture that's unique to the last 2 to 3 years. Previously, there'd been cargo delays with union contract negotiations, evolution of the mega vessels, but they were not in this league. What's has hit the ports has been almost 100 times as powerful as these earlier events. How serious is it? Well, Goldman Sachs was quoted as saying there's $24 billion in goods floating in the ships off the California coast, $24 billion. So it's significant. I'm sure some of the people on this call can relate to the pain points that have been caused by this. So today what I'm going to do, I'm going to dive into the supply chain chaos at the ports, what's some possible solutions, and then what the future looks like as we go forward. So let's take a quick overview of the two ports. The ports are a very unique asset to the United States. They're the #1 gateway of international trade, both imports and exports. Close to 40% of all Asian imports flow through these two North American ports. This is an aerial photo. The two ports are located side by side. You can see on the left side is the San Pedro area, if you know the general area, and that's where the Port of Los Angeles is. And then over to the right is the Port of Long Beach. It's about a total of 8,000 acres between the two. A lot of the land, both the city of Long Beach and the city of Los Angeles are responsible for these two ports. It's called a landlord operating model. The ports lease the terminal land, but they don't operate them. So when you hear a reporter interview Gene Soroka, the executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, and they said, we're going to hear now from the Gene Soroka who operates the ports of Los Angeles. That's a misnomer. He cannot influence the operation of the terminals. They're independent businesses and they make their own decisions. There's over 100 rail intermodal trains coming and going from this harbor complex. So it's very rail dependent. It's considered the 9th busiest port in the world. 80,000 truck moves move in and out of these multiple terminals. There's 11 terminals split between the two ports. Traditionally, and I say traditionally, in the 1980s and 90s, as international trade grew, the way the ports accommodated the increasing growth, they built bigger terminals and they did dredging out of the water and into the terminal to expand the acreage. The terminals were 100 acres and they grew them to 150 to 200 acres. And they were able to get this approved by the California Coastal Commission because they agreed to mitigate acre for acre the natural waterways in Southern California. The Back Bay and Newport Beach, both of these ports were involved in dredging the sediment that had accumulated out there. And they went further south and did other inland waterways. Then they ran out of opportunities, and the California Coastal Commission said, no more landfilling terminals. You cannot build them any bigger. So guess what? The responsibility then, it's like a warehouse. You're not going to get a bigger warehouse. You're going to operate more efficiently. And because of various reasons, they weren't able to become more efficient. And that's one of the reasons we have these things today. But these are incredible assets. Under normal conditions, about $1 billion a day flows through here. That's one of the biggest economic engines in possibly the world. So let's take a look over in China. And I was fortunate, I've been there over 10 times. And most of the trips involved touring the rail yards, the warehouses, the ports. Everybody, I think, is familiar with Catalina Island, where it is relative to the coastline. Well, Shanghai had trouble with their tremendous growth in trade, and they desperately needed a new terminal. So they picked a small island 20 miles off to sea, much like Catalina, and they built the biggest container terminal in the world, and they spent $18 billion in infrastructure money building this. I've actually taken this 6-lane highway out there, and it's the longest ocean bridge, 20 miles, second longest. The longest goes from Hong Kong to Macau. But the terminal is very automated. It's 25 million containers. To put that in perspective, that's double what the two ports of LA Long Beach. And this is only one of the container terminals on the east coast of China.
And is this, did you say double both of them combined, John?
Yes, yeah, the annual volume, one terminal here. It's tremendously, when you get on the trips I've taken, I'll visit these terminals and I'll see how big they are and the automation, and I have to use the analogy. It's like catcher's mitt. I know the West Coast ports all the way up to Prince Rupert and Vancouver, and I'm saying it's like our guys, our North American people, have a catcher's mitt standard size, but the Chinese are building a ball as big as a beach ball, and they're going to throw it to us in terms of volume of trade. And so we were already gearing up for a collision in volumes prior to COVID. COVID just had the perfect storm when it came about, because it was increasing and we were having difficulty handling it prior to COVID. So this is just one of the time. Now, let's ask the question, maybe somebody's thinking this, will the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach lose business? And will they not lose business? Well, the answer is yes. They will lose some business to the smaller terminals, Savannah, Houston, the Canadian ports. But there's a lot of attractiveness for the ports of LA Long Beach. They have one of the biggest, most powerful rail and highway connectivity. As the ships come in, they can rely on the railroads and the highways to move the cargo. They're able to handle the ultra large vessels This is very important as the vessels have grown in size from 6,000, 7, 10, 20, another 25,000 containers on one vessel. You have to have a deep channel for the ships to come in. You have to have a big terminal to handle the volume as you unload it. And you have to have the heavy cranes to unload the higher ships.
John, is there any other ports in the US that have that? I think, is it New York, or do none of them
Not
have
to
it?
the degree that we have it. We have it, you know, the time they get to New York, the ships have already stopped multiple times on the East Coast. We get the ship correct, loaded.
I see.
These things fully loaded, and they're and we have 35 million consumers in the Pacific Southwest. So high percent of that ship to unload it could require 100 acres. Some terminals are only 180 to 200 acres. So when the ships arrive, you have an issue. You got to quickly unload the containers, and they call it velocity, container velocity. You've got to quickly move them. Effectiveness of our gateway is we have over 1 billion square feet of warehousing. And the fifth one is we're the shortest ocean route, Asia to the United States. So we'll lose some, but the importers don't really have a lot of choice. They're going to continue to use LA Long Beach. So this is a depiction of the supply chain. I hope we've been in the supply chain sometimes say, yeah, it's pretty representative. And it's the global supply chain, not the domestic supply chain. And the far left, you see a factory, and that's to represent the factories in Asia. And then they'll have trucks that move it to the marine terminals and ports that export it out. And it goes across there and shows all the parties. Now, the intention of this slide is that in delivering the goods, it can take 12 to 15 different industries will handle the cargo. That's a lot of parties compared to domestic transportation in the United States. This is a fun slide next. Now, it's a very
Recently, we saw how the
interconnected.
introduction
Hold
of
on.
mega vessels
Sorry about that.
sent a tsunami of disruption through the supply chain.
This is a depiction of what happens when this is the same slide as the earlier one, same graphic. And you have the terminals, you have the marine terminals, you have the railroads, the trucks. So when the e-commerce came about, you can see the ripple effect. It came back and restated the service requirements of all the cargo each one of these parties would handle. So they're interconnected, interdependent. The problem is they don't act that way. They act independent. They make decisions. Marine terminals can decide on operating hours. It's independent but interconnected, and interdependent, but they act independent too often. They make decisions in silos. You've heard the word silo, I'm sure. They kind of have the Guinness Book of Records as the most concentrated amount of silo thinking. I think I just blew any consulting opportunity. Reality here.
That is what I hear.
So the port congestion causes. Let's just talk about a few of them. So here's one of the biggest culprits: the pandemic. When the pandemic first struck, it shut down factories all over the world, shut down the consumers buying, trucks stopped, trains stopped, system. And then as the government stimulus money came out, and consumers started buying stuff online, and they turned the volume back up. But they had to bring the ships back online, the trains and the trucks, and people in supply chain realize you just don't flip a switch. It takes time to reposition equipment and that stuff. So this was the culprit, and this is still the culprit today. Another cause of the congestion was increased volume driven by the e-commerce activity, as well as companies that were transitioning from just in time to just in case inventory. So the volumes were going up, driven by these two business strategies. Now the mega ships, you've heard of the word mega ships, and this is an example of the Benjamin Franklin that came in 18,000 TEUs, and Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Well, there's always something wrong in the supply chain, so keep going. It's okay right now.
The ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, for almost 15 years, were bragging to the trade community. We're a big ship ready. We're big ship ready. Sock it to us. Sock it to us. And I don't think they really thought through what that means when the big ships come in, because they have buried the terminals. Today, as the big ships keep coming, it takes, instead of 3 days to unload the ship, it's taking 7 to 9 to 10 days to unload the ship. And you'll see why in some following slides. But these things are as big as 3 football fields. If you're a sports fan, you might put it in perspective. But we're the biggest mega vessel handling port in North America. I wouldn't say in the world, because China can do it, and Europe, some of the European terminals can handle it. But in terms of the North American ports, we have the advantage, LA Long Beach. Advantage and maybe disadvantage. So this is what a terminal looks like today, January 2022. So when you can't clear their terminals, you can't unload any more ships. And
Wow.
many times the containers that the truckers want are in what they call the high line. The high line is designated in all the terminals that no surface trucks, street trucks can come in, because they're operating the vessel, loading and unloading. So if they had some import containers that, because of congestion, they had to drop them in the high line, then you're out of luck to get them, and they could sit there for days or weeks. And there's been a constant battle of demurrage bills sent to shippers and truckers and on this issue. But that's why there's 100+ ships out at anchor. And it's kind of tricky how the terminals, not the terminals, the ports made those ships stage further out to sea, so you don't get the bad photo options of seeing all those ships sitting close by. They've made that disappear, that issue, but it's still an issue today more than ever. There's more ships out at anchor than ever before. So another cause is that Asian terminals operate 24/7, where our terminal, in this case, LA Long Beach, are operating about 55% less. So you have this high volume of cargo coming at us, and it turns into a real bottleneck flow at the LA Long Beach port. It's kind of like 10 lanes of freeway dropping into 5. And you can imagine from your personal experience what that does to flowing of cars and what it would do to flow of freight. Another thing is marine terminals are more productive in Asia than they are in LA Long Beach. They are probably 50 to 70% more productive. So those are like factories, and they're generating product, in this case, loaded containers, and moving them on the sea faster than we can unload them.
Is that because of the automation?
Yes, very good. Yeah, many of the terminals are automated, and they have different work rules than the North American ports do. So there's some of the highest automated terminals in the world, China. And when I mentioned that one terminal that was 20 miles out to sea, handles 25 million containers a year, they spent $18 billion building that. That is as much as LA Long Beach spends in probably 5 years. And that's just one terminal they built, 18 billion. So it's the game is definitely different, Asia versus North America. So here's something called chassis. So some people might not have heard this name, but it's like a flat trailer that's essential to move containers, and they load the container off the ship onto these chassis, and then they're pulled out to a warehouse where they're unloaded, and then they're returned to the terminal. The problem is that the inventory has been sucked up by empty containers being left on the chassis, as well as loaded containers waiting in a trucker's yard or a warehouse to be unloaded. So all the inventory has been absorbed. So some of the terminals don't have chassis to put unloading containers on. So it's really played a significant role. I have to think of the old story of, for the loss of a nail, you lost the horseshoe. For the loss of the horseshoe, you lost the horse. And for the loss of the horse, you lost the messenger. For the loss of the message, you lost the war. it's kind of like that. But,
Wow. Well, and
uh,
my understanding is that we don't produce chassis in the US.
very good
So
point. Yeah,
that's,
we don't. And it takes a while to gear up the factories, especially when in Asia, where they're primarily made, the factory workers are turned on and off with COVID shutdowns. You know, you can go to work. No, you can't go to work. We're going to shut the city down. So they've had far more starts and stops than we have. So the port congestion issues. So let's see what they are. There's a solution is each terminal, 11 terminals, they have appointment systems where the drivers, to get a container, they have to call or get online and come in and say, hey, I need to pick this container up. Is there a time when it's available? And so each terminal will give the trucker an appointment. But the moves are usually tied between two terminals. So you've got two separate appointment systems working, but not communicating to each other. So if the driver is delayed at the first terminal, he's going to miss the appointment at the second. When he misses it, then it could be 3 to 4 days before he gets another appointment. A new system should be integrated, excuse me, where they're talking to each other. And so he can still keep the appointment. The second terminal system would just extend the appointment 30 minutes and say, okay, he's going to be 30 minutes late. But because
so you're
they're not-
suggesting that, John, but
Yes.
there's no project underway that's combining the appointment systems now.
No,
is there?
and I'm a little tired of hearing the ports talk. Well, truckers are missing 50% of the appointments. They're missing 30% of the appointments. You know, we're not utilizing the capacity. Well, it's the appointment system because they're delayed at another terminal, they can't get back and get their original appointment. Each day is a different
Wow.
situation. So it could be worked out, but again, these terminals are independent operators. The ports don't tell them to do this, to integrate this, but time to tell them, operate my port, you will do this.
So what you're saying is each terminal is operated by a different group, which is another problem because they're not like incented to work together necessarily.
Right, it's not like the ports of Savannah or the ports of Charleston, the two southeastern, much smaller ports, but they're operated by the port. The port builds the terminals and operates the terminals. So if a shipper says, I need extra hours, I need this, they can make the solution, they can implement it. And that's why they have limited capacity though, so in terms of volume, but that's where the difference is.
Wow,
Now
what a mess. Now, John, you have somebody who requested, and it might be coming up, so it's fine, but he asked if you would talk about, he said if you would talk about the communication between US Customs and the terminal operators as well. He said he understands that the ships are required to send their documentation to US Customs upon leaving the foreign port, but Customs knows when they will arrive, but Customs does not share that with the terminal operator. That's what he's asking.
Oh, that same message that goes to Customs goes to the terminals. They see when the ships are loaded and closed out and leave the Asian port, the terminals get that message also. So they see the containers coming and they can plan accordingly if they have some options. So that message goes to both of them.
Okay, so probably just doesn't in their case, but that it's supposed to. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, if a terminal says they don't get it, that's very odd. I mean, that's it, just part of if they're not owned by the steamship line, then the steamship partner would send it to them just for planning and operating efficiencies. They would do it. It's not a big issue. This is a picture of the Alameda corridor. This was built probably 15, 20 years ago. It's a $2.5 billion investment, 20-mile corridor from the harbor all the way up to downtown LA to the major rail yards. And the solution here is that an inland port should be considered where more and more of the containers are on the train moving up the corridor and then out to a destination. It would improve the container velocity through the terminals, which we're not seeing. We have to get that speed of containers flowing through the terminals faster. We have to have like.
Well, and one of our board members, he's like a broken record. He's brought it up I can't even tell you how many times about the desire for an inland port in like the Inland Empire. It sounds like you're saying theoretically that would be a good solution, but obviously there's some challenges with it.
Well, yeah, the problem is, and I've done a lot of warehouse site selection in the Inland Empire. A lot of the communities, you go for approval and they say, excuse me, you want to do what? You want to have a yard, no building and very few jobs. And you want to bring trains and trucks in and out of there 24 hours, 24/7 operation. Why don't you take that idea down the road? So
Take that to someone else.
yeah,
I
the
see.
NIMBY feeling is alive and well in the Inland Empire. So you would have to go out to Cabazon, quite a distance out. I like going west rather than going north to the high desert for this solution, but it needs to be done with all the obstacles and challenges. Something needs to be done to take the pressure. These ports are going to grow in volume, and I can't imagine that this could continue to operate and the poor importers and exporters having to run a supply chain strategy with these landmines you have to get through here. I don't think it's going to continue. It can't continue. Too much
Yeah,
money.
no, that's very interesting. Tony, if you're not watching, I'll let you know to watch it on the webinar because he'll be very interested on that topic. No, that's great. That's great. When you finish with this slide, let me know because I have I'll ask a question, but I don't want to deter you from the Alameda corridor.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I actually took a train that started in San Pedro and went up the Alameda corridor, went all the way out Riverside and went up the Cajon Pass. And if you're familiar with the Cajon Pass, that's Highway 15, the rail lines. You don't realize the volume that goes up and down that corridor until you're on it. And we had a dinner train, and that train had to pull over like every quarter mile. We kept pulling over, and trains would be coming up and down the corridor. So the real takeaway was, wow, this is essential. If anything that happens to that Cajon Pass, the Southern California will be choking on imports for sure.
Well, so on this Alameda corridor, like this is an inland port, right? So do they just or what?
Well, it's not an inland. This is not defined as an inland port. It's a corridor. It's a rail intermodal corridor. It's one link in a inland port. You have to have
So they just store basically.
No, they don't store. These trains are going all the way to downtown LA, and then they're going to switch. They might switch power, but then they're going to turn both of them. The Burlington Northern and the Union Pacific will turn east and take the rail lines out of LA to go to Dallas, Chicago, Kansas City, Nashville. So these are called intermodal trains. It's about close to a third, 30% to 40% of all imports go on these trains, intermodal.
Okay, that makes sense. Interesting.
So another issue that needs to be suspended, all the legislation that California loves to pile on businesses. And I'm sure some of the people watching this are aware of this and trying to work around it. But we just got to have this suspended, these regulations. They won't use the word indefinitely. I'd like to see them suspended indefinitely. So business
me too.
can concentrate on running their business. So that's one of our solutions. Another solution is you don't realize it, but empty containers are not being taken back. So we're flooding in empty containers. We're drowning. These things take up a lot of space. They're 40 foot in size. And if you're around equipment, you don't realize it doesn't take long to fill up what appeared to be a large yard. And these are taking up space on chassis where the chassis are needed because the steamship lines are not rotating these empties back fast enough. And the ports have asked them to bring in what they call sweeper ships to just come in empty and just take only empties back to get them out of here, because it's really that congestion shot on the terminals. Some of that was empties. They've never gotten out of the terminals. So this, it's funny. The terminal, the two LA ports, LA Long Beach ports, they can't tell the steamship lines what to do. There's no tariff authority. But both ports provide the pilot service. That's like a valet service. So the ships come in, they send out the pilots, they get on the ship and then drive these big mega ships through the channels and up to the berths. I always thought the port should just say, listen, if you're not taking these empties out of here, the next time your ship arrives, you will sit out there an extra month or two until we get your assurance. And we're not pulling you into the port. So
yeah, I think you're right, John, because there is, like, my understanding, because I sit on the Inland Empire Economic Partnership, and they're very they have a Southern California logistics group that's very involved with these ports, and they're basically saying that there's so many empties, there's nowhere to put them. No one wants to pay for the charges to store them. And it's literally a catastrophe.
Oh, and then they call detention, when you don't return it empty in the free time, then you're charged, you, the trucker and the shipper, on that chassis. And they said, I couldn't return it. You didn't let me return it. We wanted to return it. So they said, I don't care. You got to pay our bill. So it's been a battle with the FMC. It's not funny, been a battle with the FMC too long. It needs to be resolved. The FMC is just trying to feel some muscle power to do something. Here's another great solution: automate the terminals. There's two fully automated terminals and one partially automated. This is in Long Beach Container Terminal. I've had 3 tours of this. I never get tired of watching this thing. It's like a big person's Disneyland. Those devices on the left are handled by a computer. The computer goes under the crane to offload from the ship. And then the computer tells the tug where to go. There's 70% less longshore labor in the terminal. It turns equipment faster than anybody. It has a capacity to handle 3 million containers. It's about half the volume of the entire port of Long Beach. If it was a terminal by a port by itself, it would be in the top 5 North American ports at 3 million.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem, right? Because the unions don't want any more automation.
Yeah, it sounds like July is the big drop dead date of this year for the union contract, and they're going to supposedly push hard on this. But the management's got to push back, because this has got to happen. This is just international trade is not going to slow up. It's going to continue to keep coming. So
yeah, that's a
so
problem.
here's a couple examples of what some importers did. Amazon, a not real out of the box thinking company. They buy 53-foot domestic trailers from Asia, and they just said, hey, on all those new Asian 53-footers, let's charter a ship. And they brought them into Houston. This is where they bring them into Houston. And they had to load them on special equipment to get them off the terminal. But this is just one example of what a company did to keep their cargo moving. They filled the brand new empty 53s with consumer goods to come over here. So that's one. Peloton's another one. You probably heard Peloton on the news some time ago. They ended up spending close to $100 million to air freight bikes into the North America to keep their customers happy.
So the 53-footers that Amazon did, is that because like Houston couldn't take the big ships? Is that related?
Well, Houston could take bigger ships, but they didn't. They just had this option. They couldn't wait. They couldn't have more ships coming. They already have ships in line off
Right.
Long Beach.
So they just sent them to Houston basically, and they bought their own. They made their own containers so they could do it.
Yeah, well, they buy them for domestic transportation anyway. So they said, hey, wait a minute, let's the next supply of those 53-footers, let's load our domestic in them and let's take them to Houston. And this is a part of Houston where it's a break bulk yard. So it's not a typical container yard. And if you see these cranes on the ship, they're self-loaders and unloaders. So they don't need the big cranes to offload it like a container ship. So they were able to solve the problem here. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then, so here's what's coming. What's next? The business dropped off a little in December, but now it's coming back with a vengeance in January. They want to get ahead of the two hiccups. One little hiccup is the Chinese New Year. It's February 1st, when all the factories will shut down. So importers are rushing as much as they can before that. That's usually a 2-week shutdown. But you never know with the COVID issues in Asia that might be longer. But the bigger hiccup, it's more of a landmine, not a hiccup, is the longshoreman contract, which expires in July 1st of this year.
Wow. And how often do they expire? Like how many years is it?
Well, there's been a period where they've got extensions on them. I believe it's a 3-year period.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I believe it is. But importers will start pushing their volume to get in ahead of that. They don't want any of their cargo locked up because of work stoppages or slowdowns. So it's another issue. Is it getting better? Well, not quite. In January, this month, 105 ships were at anchor on January 6th. It's the record. They never had that many ships. So
Well,
they're
and I
not-
also heard, John, that they were slowing the ships down, like because they just had too many ships waiting outside of, LA Long Beach because it was, polluting the area. So they just like slowed them down. So instead of like, on the highway driving 65 or something, they're driving 20 or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. Good point. They're either already arrived at anchor, 100 miles off sea or 40 miles, or they're slowing them down. So
Wow, so insane.
we did a study for Target stores on their transload operation in Southern California. And we were back at their headquarters, and we were told by one of the senior executives that if they save one day on average from all their vendors in Asia to all their retail stores in North America, it's $100 million to the bottom line. So 100 million, just if they save one day in transit. It just goes to show you that there's money in these containers, and I'm probably a number of the people on the call clearly know that, but time
That's
is
why
money.
people like Target or Walmart or whatever would spend their own money to do it, to buy their own containers or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, and chartering ships, and they've
Yep.
had to, there's too much money at hand. So the situation requires innovative solutions. I've been dealing with this port. We've been based in Southern California for 40 years. I've consulted on the terminals, with the truckers, with the terminal operators, with the railroads, and it's a complex problem. I'm concerned that there's not enough out-of-the-box thinking, and I haven't seen any of it now. I mean, I haven't heard any conversations on it, that it really takes people to push the envelope in what should be. A guy at the executive director of the retail, what's it called? Retail Industry Leaders Association, Jonathan Gold, asked the question, maybe it's time we look at these ports and ask the question, are they organized in a manner to meet the needs of the 21st century? And I thought that was quite a profound question. Because especially what we have here in LA Long Beach, we have the landlord model. In Georgia and South Carolina, we have the operating model. And I think we have to get to the point in Southern California that we get a blend of the landlord and operating model. The problem is the terminal leases go on for 30 to 40 years. So they already have long-term leases that they can't go in February and knock on the door of the terminal operator and say, by the way, we're going to tell you how to operate your terminal. You will turn trucks in 30 minutes on average. You will move containers through your terminal on average. You will not build, demurrage, or detention. They don't have that power. They're a long way from that power, but I think something's going to happen because it's not working the way it is.
Yeah, it certainly sounds very important. And actually, it's a good time for me to bring this up because Bill Stankowitz, I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but from the Savannah Ports is on the webinar, and he said, great presentation, that the Savannah GPA has only 5 ships waiting to be unloaded. And he was talking about some people he knows in common. And he also said that he asked if you were familiar with the work that Saudi is involved with the UAE ports like Dubai. Anyway. I just wanted to tell you that he was online and thought your presentation was great.
Oh, good. That's the idea. I want it to be helpful. So this is I would like to see this solution on the top of the stack, but it's a pretty gutsy solution. And
I think it's a great idea though, John, because I don't see it being solved either if we don't do something like that.
Yeah, just to give you my background, I know these terminals well. I've consulted to the majority of them. I've been in those terminals. I've seen the vessel unloading, the truck gate moves, and I've been with transloaders up the road in Carson and shippers, and I kind of know how the pieces of the puzzle come together. This is essential. What we've done in the past is not adequate to go forward. And we've had these issues on chassis and turn times and prior to COVID. So you can't say, well, when COVID leaves, it'll all get better. It'll get back to normal. No, normal was a problem. So we can't let it get back to normal. We got to have something much better. So, but the plus is in Southern California, we've got the greatest cluster of freight forwarders, importers, exporters, truckers, have the most experience and knowledge. And I would form an elite team to solve this problem, and because it can be done. And I would ask the politicians that they can come to the meeting, but sit over here. Don't get on the don't be but near the table, and just listen to the solutions and support them. Because I've been in these collaboration meetings for 30, 40 years, been aware of them, and they just haven't worked together. So maybe all this pain will drive people to work together and realize, hey, I'm a terminal, but I deal with truckers, and I've got to modify my systems. And in the defense of the terminals, they operate in an environment that's very unique. I consulted to them first in 1990. A guy named Bruce Morgo told me, John, you're dealing with a very unique industry. We can't do benchmarking. We can't do forecasts. And he was kind of giving me some reasons why you can't take best practices somewhere else and bring them into their world. He says, John, we have the most expensive land in the world, $300,000 an acre. We have the most expensive labor. We have the most expensive investments in capital equipment. And you want us to do what? So I think because of that, you can't leave the terminals to their own direction by themselves, because they're so focused on trying to move and save money in that environment that they can't think out of the box. And I shouldn't say that, because that's some of them are my clients, but we got to face reality whether we like it or not.
Unfortunately, it's true. And like I said, I sit on this the logistics council with the IEP, and there's the ports, the rail, the transportation commissioner, and all those folks are part of it. And it's like you said, this is one big challenge. I mean, I think you're right. The skills exist, but there's a lot of silos and opinionated politicians related to the whole thing.
Yeah. And then you have the longshore.
Yep,
And so
that is very true. That's a whole nother problem.
What do you think you're going to do? Say, oh, I haven't paid. The ships are big, is bigger, and you guys are not making money. You're hurting. What? I don't understand. So,
yeah, and just so you know, John, like some of the folks who are asking questions / providing input are saying, like, sounds like there's so many players involved, like it's needing a systems engineering solution, and then adding to that probably means something around automation, 24/7 system engineering solution. Like it sounds like like you said, the landlord. Sounds like it's lots of pieces that'll have to come together is what folks are commenting on.
that's very good. When I looked at, I was working with the terminals in 1975, 1980. And they were much simpler than they are today. They didn't have the big mega ships. They didn't have what they call vessel sharing allowances. They didn't have Pier Pass. They didn't have other things. And all of a sudden, as the volume increased, the processes all became more complex. And you're saying, hey guys, that's the last thing you want to do. Is the volume increases, you want to try to streamline your processes. And I don't think if we went through the archives, we'd find many articles talking about streamlining processes, at least at these terminals. And, I don't mean to throw mud at these guys. They have a tough job. They're landlocked and everything. But meanwhile, back in the real world, we've got to correct this problem. We can't.
There's a lot of good people, but like you said, there's a lot of, by no means is it getting better. And by the way, I'll throw out these other things. Alan mentioned that Beijing announced yesterday that they're going to stop loading outbound for about a week. He doesn't know what outbound port, but he said that that's what they announced.
Yeah, that start and stop is a killer. Is anybody exposed to operations at all? You can't stop and start stuff that easily. There's a cost, and the catch up is never, oh, we lost a day, so we'll take a day to catch up. No, it's going to take 5 days to catch up for 1 day you lost sometimes. Generally,
exactly.
This is a trend here that reshoring back to America, North America, is definitely coming. It's many companies have said that, and they're saying that the leading reshoring operation will be an automated operation. We've got to get past the cost of our labor. And this is an area you guys know far more than me, I'm sure. But
No,
next
I see it happening, and it's happening on the quiet though, because of course, who wants to advertise it? Because it's not like it happens with the drop of a hat. So it's definitely something that's going to continue to create supply chain changes for sure.
yeah, it's time for the politicians, the state and the economic development people to be aware of this and position their marketing and their story to help these to reposition like this. It's not easy. It can't be done in a year, 6 months. It can hardly be done in 2 years. So they should bring more resources to bear to help the goods movement people. So COVID really elevated disruptions, and it's now we're seeing that risk mitigation is commonly used in corporate supply chain discussions. You know, how do we mitigate any chance of disruption if we ship by truck this way, if we use this port of entry, or if we locate a warehouse here? Risk mitigation is now all of a sudden being considered. Where prior to COVID, it was gradually becoming more important, but COVID just slapped it in the face and said, you better do a better job, America, on this risk mitigation. You better make sure when you do an analysis, a more thorough one. And that's what we're seeing. So we're seeing a pattern that shippers are reviewing their 3PL partnerships. They're generally saying that, hey, what you were doing pre-pandemic was great, but I need to see a lot more in the post-pandemic world in terms of technology, in terms of collaboration, in terms of innovation. So you see some of the 3PLs breaking from the pack and differentiating themselves, DHL and a number of other ones, C.H. Robinson. So they had this constant continuous improvement thing. They had that going before the pandemic, so they just accelerated that. And we think we do a lot in the 3PL outsourcing and 3PL partnership work. So we're very aware of what's happening and in touch with it. But that's definitely coming about. So that's kind of, I hope I'm on my time. I hope the people that were on the call.
No, yeah, absolutely, John. We have some questions too, if you can answer them. So there's a variety here. One relates to, like what can smaller businesses do that, cannot charter ships, if you will. That's a hard one. Do you have any ideas for them?
Well, we've had small companies call us on that, and it's not easy if they're dealing with a freight forwarder. The freight forwarder only has so much capacity, and they can't part the waters and get through this delay and congestion. I would make sure that you're working with a quality provider, and they're doing the best they can. They're communicating to you, but it's really tough. We were asked by a beverage importer, a small operator. He was having tremendous trouble trying to get his product in, especially through the holidays. And he said, well, I have stuff coming from Europe. Maybe I should consider Houston. Now that idea I kind of like. So you're avoiding, and Houston doesn't have the congestion that LA Long Beach does. And we have another big client that uses Houston on product coming from Europe and has not smooth sailing, but it's better than LA Long Beach. So it's really challenging for the little guy to find a solution. I'm sure the owner of their companies are saying, hey, come on, you're supposed to be the whiz in supply chain logistics. Come up with a solution. We can't be going through this. So I would just make sure whoever your partners are quality partners. And if they're a 3PL, if they're a freight forwarder, trucking companies, you need to, and I think you need to reconfirm your commitment to them. Look at we think we are in this together, and we want to do whatever we can to make your ability to serve us better. What is it? Do we ship early, or do we do this? And just ask the question and listen and see what they can say. But you definitely need to evaluate your partners and see, are they the best possible quality guys I can use to get my product through. But even the number one tier one guys are not going to be able to part the waters and clear this congestion. Their ships still have to wait at sea. You have the Canadian ports. We're very familiar with Prince Rupert. 10 years ago, we brought Prince Rupert on and helped them develop their model. They've been strained though. They've had some backups. The snow sometimes hit them, but that's less congested. There's been some people considering some of the Mexican ports. That's a little dicey though. New operations down there trying to come up. So I would go to the smaller U.S. ports as an option, and I would evaluate my partners and see if I've got quality guys. And remember, you got to cut them a little slack here. These are untested times. These are something that's nobody's ever gone through before. Hopefully it'll either kill us or make us stronger. So hopefully it'll make us stronger. But sorry, I wasn't more
Absolutely.
helpful.
No. Well, that's what I would think too. And like buy local is what Bill said. And, I tend to think that might be, like the little guys are not going to have an easy time of this. And like Alan Dunn is saying here that the, globalization has occurred faster than global infrastructure investments in the US have kept up. And China saw it and was doing it more in advance. So it's gonna have to be some sort of a massive shoot for the moon kind of project to resolve all these problems. Now, one of the other questions is somebody said if you could go back to that slide about the California regulations and explain them a bit more, because they were wondering what those were about. Maybe we can be providing feedback to our lawmakers anyway about that, because I know that's one of the things the IEEP does as well.
Yeah, well, the first one, the one in the middle, AB5, that's the employer-employee legislation that forces the truckers, the drayage operators that have the owner-operator model to become employee models, and it'll change their whole cost and everything. A lot of the owner-operators don't want that, even though the politicians think they want to be employees. So that's created a lot of uncertainty in the bid. A lot of this is uncertainty because you don't know what the cost will be to your goods movement. The CARB is regulating forklifts now at warehouses. They have a secondary emission factor that's warehouses are going to be responsible for any emissions of any yard equipment or forklift equipment. The California Air Pollution Controls 2020, that's constantly being rewritten, and the list goes on and on. I probably next time I'll have a list of all the issues. It'd be clearer than this. So
yeah, no problem. And I have a few I can throw out there. So there's a law that they have to upgrade their truck if it's past, I think 2011 or 12, I forget which is it's requiring significant investment in new trucks, but that's not that they're available. So that's a problem. There was a recent one that was passed that's really a nightmare that we were really trying to avoid. But that really relates more to the warehouses. But basically, in essence, it's kind of like in and out. If you think about the cars going through an in and out, they would be responsible for the pollution of all the cars going through an in and out, and that's what they've assigned the warehouses now. So this is a disaster. And then there's the owner operators for the trucks, like basically, that whole considering them an employee law. So that there's lots of challenges. Yeah, AB5.
And
Yeah,
both the ports of LA, Long Beach have committed by 2035, there'll be zero emission trucks pulling in and out of the harbor, zero emission. So, and those trucks aren't even designed yet in the market. So,
well, and two of our participants have suggested a couple of things too. That's not pretty for Southern California, but one would be an out of the box thing that Alan suggested is like maybe the folks who automated the China port should do the same with at Ensenada, and because they could get it approved and get it to go through there.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little story on that. About 25 years ago, a company called Hutchinson Marine out of China, the biggest marine terminal operator in the world, was meeting with the Mexican government to develop those terminals down there in Ensenada in another port. And I heard the story from a good source that every time they had the meeting, if they brought a big steamship line along with them, they had to bring special briefcases full of money, and they had to slide it across the table and no questions were asked, or there was no meeting. And Hutchinson got a little concerned after so much time, and they said, we're not making any progress. All we're doing is spending money here. I don't think the Mexican government's going to make this happen. And they pulled out of the deal after 3 years of trying to make some sense of it. So
Really? Well, it sounds like it would have preempted a lot of this if that had happened.
oh yeah, it's a shame that it didn't turn out better. But it is I like that option because that's right down in our doorstep. It's and they might revisit that solution because all this pain, there's a lot of money. So like I said, $24 billion just sitting in anchored ships. So, and you got stuff all over just sitting where the customers are not making money. They're not selling it. They're not getting a return on their investment. So
Yeah.
that loss will drive somebody to do some big decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing was Bill brought up that UAE might be a good way to reroute goods, and then they could come in. I guess, I don't know, reroute it through UAE to the US. So I don't know. That's another. It's going to be a really challenging problem to solve these. To solve this port problem is by no means going to get caught up by X date.
No, and the forecast is we're going to go through this all of 2022 and possibly into 2023. So this is really a national emergency. The way it's hurting our companies, it needs emergency response on this thing. I mean, this is incredible. The jobs it's costing, the money it's costing firms. But there are companies making money too. You look at the inflationary deal at the store and everything. So consumers are buying and they're still, so maybe the financial pain is not as great as I thought. I haven't seen any numbers on it, but I would have to think it's significant.
Yeah, well, Alan was just saying that the UAE option would be expensive, which is an issue. So I don't know. That's the issue. We have lots of parties and lots of challenges. Your presentation has been, really, really good, John. It's really helpful for us to be able to learn where we stand. And what I would say is, for all the manufacturers and smaller distributors that are on the line, any distributors really, we should be proactively thinking about this because it's not going to magically solve itself. So
my suggestion is they get with their associations and really push them to push the state of California and the federal government to address this issue, and don't just fly out here one day and take a port cruise and then say, 24 hours, I'm gone. That doesn't solve the problem.
It was really ridiculous. I would agree. Yeah. Well, and actually, Bill just brought up a good point, and I want to bring this up, Bill, while you're still on too. He was saying Georgia Tech and MIT should work on a solution. Well, one of the things that I would tell you is that the IEEP, which is the Inland Empire Economic Partnership, has done some good work on getting this logistics council going, and it's gotten the respect of Brookings, or they've used the Brookings data, and we do have Georgia Tech involved. So now we just got to get that group, however, to be like, to your point earlier, John, there's a lot of stakeholders that don't necessarily want anything to change, and that's a problem. But we do have players ready. We just got to get them going.
A little side note on that Georgia Tech thing. I wonder how many people on the call know that Amazon supports MIT and Harvard doing research on business trends and everything. So here's a highly successful company saying, wait a minute, we're going to also use the resources of America's greatest universities to make us more competitive. So I'm all for that. Bring the universities to bear and help get some of that. And
Yeah, I agree. It would be a good idea. So, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, John. We really appreciate you giving us the update, and please continue to join us. We will do another Emerging with Supply Chain Strength webinar next month. We'll send you a note, and hopefully we will still be in person for our, we're planning a member appreciation event and networking opportunity. I mean, you can join if you're not a member, although I would like for you to become a member. And that is going to be on February 2nd at Luna Modern Mexican Kitchen in Rancho. You've got to, or maybe it's Ontario. Well, anyway, wherever it is, Rancho's, it's Victoria Gardens. And if you could, but you do have to sign up because we can't afford to not know who's coming ahead of time, because it doesn't work that way in the supply chain world, as you know. We won't have food. So anyway, thank you, and please join us again next month. And John, thank you very much. You're more than welcome to join us, and thank you very much for doing the presentation. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and I apologize for the technical difficulty.
No, you know, these things happen. So thank you very much. All right, we'll see everyone next month.